Today, actually, I'm calling this one Autism, Faith, and Inclusion, Building Belonging in Every Space. Welcome back to Kainos Joy Podcast, where neurodiversity meets grace. Today, we're diving deep into autism, especially how it intersects with faith, identity, inclusion, and education. Whether you're a parent, an educator, a leader, or someone on the spectrum, this episode is for you. Let's break the stigma and build bridges. So joining us today is Kevin Golden, a pastor, neurodivergent advocate who does voiceovers and IT work. He has a lot to offer. This episode is going to be about bridging professional and personal insights on autism and inclusive leadership. Start with the big picture. What do you wish more people truly understood about autism today? And then I will get into those 8 questions, I promise.
Wow, that's a big one. I think probably the number one thing I wish people understood about autism today is it's a spectrum. You might have heard that word used, the autism spectrum, or people on the spectrum, or autism spectrum disorder, ASD. You might have heard these terms. But the point is, it's a spectrum. It's not everyone's the same. I mean, it's neurodiverse, right? That's the kind of the term that we use, is because everyone's different, even in terms of autism. And a lot of times, especially back in the 70s, 80s, when I was growing up, autism was the kid that wore the football helmet because he pounded his head on the wall. He was nonverbal. He rocked a lot, that whole thing. And you knew he was autistic, or you knew at least something was different, wasn't neurotypical. But today, more and more people are being diagnosed on the spectrum, and people my age are finding out later in life they're on the spectrum. They knew something was different about them, but they didn't know what exactly. Autism certainly never came to mind because, again, that was thought of as the nonverbal, rocking, banging the head on the wall kind of diagnosis. That was what everybody thought was autism. When I say everybody, I mean in the public eye, maybe not in the medical profession, but in the public. And so, and that included people like me who were on the spectrum and had no idea growing up in the 70s and 80s, because that wasn't diagnosed. That wasn't part of the spectrum diagnosis. So nowadays it's more common, especially for children, right? They catch it early, which is very helpful. But what that leaves is this gap where tens of thousands of people probably that are on the spectrum, they don't know, or they've just recently found out. And they work in an environment typically where most people still don't know that the high functioning portion of the spectrum is still on the spectrum. It's still considered autism. And so when people like us are in the workplace and we do find out, we do get diagnosed, and we try to talk about it, the reaction typically is, nah, there's nothing wrong with you. You're fine.
Right.
Okay. Well, there's 2 reasons that's really hurtful. Okay. So if you're not on the spectrum and you're watching this, please keep this in mind. This is hurtful to people on the spectrum that you say that kind of reaction to, because number one, it's dismissive. And it's like, we're trying to reach out and say, look, we know we're different. We're trying to fit in with your neurotypical world. I may do some things that make you uncomfortable or that don't seem, quote, normal, but I'm working to try to fit in. But you're being dismissive of it. Number 2, the statement itself, there's nothing wrong with you, as if there's something wrong with being on the spectrum or neurodivergent at all. There's nothing wrong with that. We're just different. We're just wired differently. There's a great picture I saw online recently of a brain where they had done some brain scans, and there were like colors indicating, I guess, the number of neurons in the brain. And for a neurotypical person, there were some colors spattered here and there. But then they showed the brain of somebody on the autism spectrum, and there were exponentially more of these little colored dots representing way more neurons in the brain. So we're physically wired differently in our brains. And yes, it gives us abilities that may seem like extra special, like, oh, wow, you're a genius. Okay, I don't know if I adopt that term or not, whatever, fine. But it does allow me to think a lot faster. and see things faster than a lot of people do and think ahead and things like that and process things faster and, that sort of thing. So superpowers, cool. But it also is kind of a disability in a sense where we've got, I hate using that word, but it is difficult at times for us because we've got so many more neurons. We're processing so much more information. And that's where the overstimulation comes in, right? So the sensory overload. Yeah. So I see more, I hear more, I smell more, I feel more than most people, neurotypical people, because I've got all these extra neurons. So when I walk into a Walmart and they got the fluorescent lights, that's terrible. When I'm sitting in a meeting at the office and there's water dripping down the window, it sounds like an incessant drum that won't stop. But for everybody else, they don't even notice the thing. I walk into an elevator and somebody's just casually wearing cologne or perfume because they want to smell good. And everybody's like, oh, that's a nice perfume you're wearing. What for me, it's like,
gagging.
I can't breathe because it's literally 10x or 50x times more potent to my nose than it is to everyone else in the elevator. And I can't breathe. It takes my breath away. It may make me gag, it may make me nauseous. Unless it's a really pleasant, fruity, sweet kind of a smell, then maybe I really enjoy it. That's just a couple of examples of how it's difficult,
right,
to process all that extra stuff. But
it can lead to impulsive thoughts that might come out in words. Like I could just see you as a little kid saying, "Oh, what is that awful stench?" And then it turns out to be that woman's favorite perfume, so she's offended, and then one thing leads to another.
Yeah. I mean, my poor son-in-law, he got in the car the other day, and I did my best for the longest I could. Finally, I just started coughing and gagging and had to roll the windows down. And my daughter, she knows because she's autistic, and so is he. But she was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, is it my perfume?" I'm like, "No." And my son-in-law goes, "Oh, is it my cologne?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm sorry." And she's like, "How much did you put on?" And he goes, "1 squirt." So, and he's autistic too, so he likes that scent. But for me, it was, so, these are the kinds of things that we deal with in the work environment. And there is something different about us, but that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with us. It just means we're different. And so just because we don't act like Rain Man doesn't mean that we're not on the spectrum.
Right. And now, Rain Man, that's a good point. So just to be clear with the viewers, now what Rain Man had in that story was he had I don't know if we would have called it high functioning autism or Asperger's. People don't want to use that word anymore because of the Nazi that was behind it all.
Right.
So it's a terrible word to use someone's name anyway, I think, for a disorder. That's like saying all people are the same. So I don't like that word, but savantism is what I've heard being used because he specifically, his character, Dustin Hoffman, was playing a savant, an autistic savant. I remember like some toothpicks fell on the ground and he was confused because on the packet it said 500 and there was like 501 or whatever it was.
Right.
And so, or like he knows everyone's birthday and what day that was on the week. So it's interesting. It's things that the average person would not be able to do. And math, they're very good at math. So I don't know, any of these things, sort of the savantism, do you feel like you have some of that in you or?
Oh, maybe to some degree, maybe nowhere near to the degree I think that Dustin Hoffman's character portrayed. But, I know a lot about a few things, right? The things that are my passions, to the point that I can talk incessantly about it and drive someone crazy and not pick up on the social cues until they go, "I'm sorry, I gotta go," that kind of thing. I'm like, I did it again, that kind of a thing. So, I do retain a lot of information about things that I enjoy. I have been called genius by multiple people. I don't know. I've never taken an IQ test. Whatever. I don't care about the genius badge. But I am able to remember things. I learn quickly when it comes to like electronics, computers, musical recording, that kind of thing. And
that's important though, that people are aware of the gifts as well.
It is. I think it's a superpower and I love it. And I love it as much as I detest the sensory overload portion of being on the spectrum. But there are things you can do about that as well, obviously. But to answer the first question, the biggest thing is it's a spectrum. We're not all the same. And just because we don't bang our head, or we're nonverbal, or we the rocking thing, or any of the stuff that you think is autism, doesn't mean that we're not on the autism spectrum. It also doesn't mean you need to treat us differently, or think that we can't do our jobs or anything like that. Try not to be so dismissive if you're not on the spectrum or not neurodivergent and someone says, hey, listen, I just got a recent diagnosis. I'm on the autism spectrum. Don't be so dismissive. There's nothing wrong with you, because that's dismissive, and it is kind of an insult, as if being autistic is something wrong, broken. But we're not. We're not broken. It's just different.
Well, that's perfect. It leads excellent into the next question, which is workplace accommodations. So you are in this situation, you're going to work, let's just say the hypothetical, you tell your boss, you just probably were really stressed about kind of talking about it, had to practice in the mirror a little bit, and finally, approach your boss and say, look, I just got diagnosed with it, whether it's autism, ADD, whatever, there's a spectrum, and I'm on this spectrum. These are my strengths. These are my weaknesses. How would you respond if you were the boss? And what kind of accommodations would you provide for them? And if you haven't thought this out, even just how would you think you would like to have someone respond, if that makes sense? I don't know.
Well, the first thing is, to go back to the first question, I would want them to not be dismissive and say, there's nothing wrong with you.
Right.
Because that's what my boss did.
Right.
Not my current boss. My boss sees this, the one that's my boss now. It's not him. It was several bosses back. She's actually retired, no longer with the company. But yeah, she was dismissive of it, because again, she had the stereotypical idea of what most people think of as autistic, lower functioning, and so she's like, well, clearly that's not you, so you must not be autistic. So there's nothing wrong with you. But the reason I even brought it up to her. And funny enough, it was within 2 weeks of this event that I'm about to tell you about. I found out a couple of weeks later that I was autistic. I went back to explain, hey, listen, I'm not rude, insensitive, or a jerk, but I am straightforward and honest. And so what had happened was, apparently, I'm a big Apple guy, and a Microsoft coworker is a hard time. I still use Microsoft products. It's not Windows, but, somebody would say something like, yeah, Microsoft sucks or whatever. And, because I was being truthful and straightforward, right? Which is typical for high functioning autistic people to do. And so she called me in her office one day and she's like, hey, listen, I've been getting some reports, blah, 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 blah. You can't just say things suck, And I'm like, well, like what? She goes, well, like this XYZ, blah, 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 Microsoft thing. I'm like, well, it does suck. And she just goes, there, see that? You can't do that. I'm like, well, why not? I don't understand. I'm like, okay, well, I'll try. And then 2 weeks later, I found out I'm autistic, and I started researching, well, what does that mean? What are some of the traits? And from my perspective, I'm just being honest, and I'm not wasting the time to beat around the bush. I'm just being straightforward. I'm getting to the point so that we can move on and get things done. That's how we
about the verbiage. It wasn't the word sucks. It was more like, even if you said it's a terrible company, it didn't matter the verbiage, right? I'm just getting that clear.
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, those are the words that she used. So It might've been some other words. But I think in general, it's just being really straightforward and honest. And so in other words, what I didn't do that she wanted me to do was, well, so that thing that Microsoft blah, blah, blah does where, it doesn't quite I don't like that. I sure wish they would really put the time and money and research into making that a better functionality, a better solution. It sure would improve the product if they
beat around the bush.
Oh my God. That is like, I don't have time to waste on that. That is so blah, it's a time waste. And I feel like I'm lying. When I do that. Right. And I'm like, I'm not a dishonest person. I can't stand that. So since that time, I've had to learn how to go, well, and what's funny is I did that for a while, and then people started kind of coming along to the way I was doing it. And now everybody's just like, oh yeah, no, that totally sucks. I'm like, I got in trouble for that 6 years ago.
That's funny.
So if you're the boss, don't respond with that kind of dismissive, there's nothing wrong with you. That's how I would want a boss to respond. And then to say, okay, that's fine. Everybody's different. People have different things that they deal with. What can I do to help accommodate you? Right. That's the response I would have hoped to have had, but I didn't. So specifically things that could help would be, put me next to a window, maybe turn off the fluorescent lights or some of the fluorescent lights overhead, those kinds of things, letting me work remote more often, those are all things that help. Letting me put in AirPods, put them on noise cancellation mode and just disappear from the surrounding thing. And then if you need me, just tap me on the shoulder or send me a chat through our chat software. But, those are the kinds of quick things, that I think would help.
Yeah.
We'll go, I think, deeper into it here in a little bit.
Yeah. Because the next one, number 2 is, should I disclose my neurodivergent diagnosis at work, and how can I do it safely? We did touch upon that. Is there anything else you want to add to that? While
definitely.
we get into autistic burnout would be next.
I would not go into your interview and say, hi, I'm autistic. Like, if you're high functioning autistic, you can get the job done. And you can probably mask. If you don't know what that term means, it just means pretend to be normal. Hate that word, but you know what I mean. And just get the job, and then get established on the job. And then after you've been there for a few weeks, then maybe you want to go to HR and say, I don't know how my boss would respond to this, so I didn't go directly to them. So I came to you first. I'm autistic. I'm on the spectrum. I'm neurodivergent. However you want to word it. I'm not asking to be treated special. I just may ask for some accommodations and a little understanding. And I would like your help, HR, in approaching my manager, so that this goes smoothly. That's how I would do it. But I certainly wouldn't walk into the interview and say, hi, I'm autistic. Because immediately they're going to be like, oh, okay. And then go through the interview and go, big red X, mark that off, because they've got their stereotypical ideas about what that means. And they probably won't even hire you unless they're a great company and they really believe in diversity for the company. In which case they might be like, oh yeah, we want you on our team. Especially if they're on the spectrum, or they have children on the spectrum, or have friends on the spectrum, and they know, wow, this guy's got talents. He's got special abilities. And we know how to accommodate for the difficulties.
Why can't you just go in there and say you're autistic? But we're not quite there yet in society. So
we're not. I wish we were. We're getting closer. We really are. But I think, there with the whole George Floyd situation a few years ago and the DEI thing that came out of that, a lot of companies were like, wow, we got to shift. We've got to make some changes here. Right. And a lot of good things were done. I think there was probably some swinging too far on the pendulum kind of thing on some things, but definitely good discussions were being had and good changes were being made at corporations across the country. That was great for diversity in ethnicity or maybe in sexual orientation or things like that. And it really helped those people a lot. But I wish they would have just kept on going, okay, who else out here is diverse from the main population that we need to include in these discussions? And they would have quickly picked up on autism or ADHD, because it is a huge part of the population that is not accounted for, that is not accommodated for, that is not discussed in most situations, in most corporations. So I wish that it was.
When the world went viral, like if you think about with COVID, when everyone started talking to everyone else all over the world because we had nothing else to do but stare at our computers and our phones. Even our jobs, became remote. I think that's when a lot of this came to the surface, because then there was that moment where, now we all have to go back to work. So for any of us, anyone who's neurodiverse at all, whether it's ADHD, ADHD, a little bit autism, a little bit ADHD, autistic, that was very difficult time for us, because our whole world, and it's difficult for anyone, but especially for someone who's used to their routines, and those routines and structure are what keep them sane, quite honestly, keep them on the straight and narrow and focused and being able to, do the right things for their body and their mind and their health, rather than, the other end of the spectrum, which is self-medicate, go down the deep end, before you know it, you're in an addiction or something like that.
Right.
And that's a lot of neurodivergent people do go down that road. I went down that road in college, luckily came back. I feel like that's part of my message too, is like, to just kind of be aware of these folks around you, and they're very sensitive. The rejection sensitivity dysphoria is a real thing, and it can cause a person to really regress from wherever they were. So yeah, that's a real passion of mine, trying to help, bridge the gap there. So autistic burnout kind of parallels into that. How can it be prevented? Autistic burnout.
So I think before we jump into the answer to that, maybe a little background
Right. Opposed to masking.
To distinguish between autistic burnout and autistic meltdown.
Meltdown.
They are two different things.
Those are different, yes.
If you see someone with autism that just explodes, right? And you think, oh, wow, they're having a temper tantrum.
Right.
Whether that's a kid, a teenager, or even an adult, they may just like, just blow up, right? And you think, man, you need to get a hold of your anger problems. They don't have anger problems. They're autistic. And what's happened is they were a pot of tea on the fire, taking in their circumstances, their overstimulation from sensory overload, all the stuff that they're working through in life. And they're trying to be as normal as they can for the non-autistic people, the non-diverse people. They're masking. They're pretending to be normal. And when all of that input, the problems of life, their daily, just everything they have to do, their routine being broken, like during COVID, too much smells, too much sounds, too much noises, or sight, or lights, or whatever. And now all of a sudden and now the tea kettle is coming to a boil, and the pressure can't be held in anymore. They can't pretend anymore. They can't mask anymore. And the pressure just pops out the top, and they blow up all over the place. And it looks like they're having a temper tantrum, an anger problem issue, when all they're doing is opening the release valve and letting out all of the stress of all of this overload from input. And then 5 minutes later, cap goes back on, pressure's been released, everything is fine. And everybody around them, if they didn't know what happened, if they don't understand what just happened there, they all take it personally. They all get weirded out. They all get freaked out. They all get scared, and it can leave a mess behind. And they're like, oh my gosh. Meanwhile, the autistic person's like, so what are we having for dinner? Like, everything's perfectly fine. And it is, because they let the steam out. And now they're back to their base, their normal, and everything's fine. So that's an autistic meltdown. Burnout, completely different. A lot of the same things lead to it. And instead of letting the steam out, you keep holding it in, and you keep holding it in, because you've learned really well how to mask and how to hold it in, because you don't want to blow up on people, because you see how they react. And so you're like, you feel it coming on. You're like, nope, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. And you just keep holding it in. And you're like, I have to keep doing what I'm doing. I can't stop what I'm doing. I've got to finish my project. I've got to get this thing done. I've got to finish writing this paper for school, whatever it is. I've got to get my job done at work. I've got to sit in this traffic. I can't just blow up and ram my car into the guy in front of me because I'm getting impatient. I've got to get home. And then you finally get home, and you just crash. So instead of the blah, it's the right. You completely just crash. Right. You're crying your guts out. Okay. Afterwards, your nerves feel like you're a computer system with a bunch of computer circuits, and somebody took a gigawatt of power and plugged it into this computer that should only have a megawatt of power, and it just sent electricity through all of the circuits and completely fried the circuits of the computer. That's how your nerves feel in your body.
Wow.
You're exhausted. Sometimes for days it takes to recover.
Sickness, right? Sometimes you can get yourself sick. Even.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, your immune system can go down.
Mhm.
You just want to sleep.
Yeah.
It can look like depression, and it kind of can be a depressive state, certainly. But it's like depression and exhaustion, and your nerves feeling fried, and your brain not being able to process anything anymore. It's hard to talk. You just want to sleep. It's really a tough place to be in. It's unlike the meltdown where you just blah, and let it out and everything's fine. Now I'm back to normal and I can just go right back to doing what I'm doing. The burnout can last for days or weeks.
Mm.
And the hard part is I still have to get up and go to work tomorrow.
Mm.
I still have to go clean house. I still have to do laundry. I still have to take care of my wife and kids. I still have to write my school papers. And, you can't just check out from the world unless maybe you have a really understanding family, a really understanding job. You've got lots of paid time off you can take. You just take a week off on a short notice because your manager understands your situation or whatever. But even then it's like, now you're asking the family to pick up the slack on cleaning the house and the laundry and, try to be quiet and not make a bunch of noise in the house. And so it's hard, right? Unless you've got money sitting around where you can go check yourself into a hotel for a week and be totally isolated and take a week off of paid time off. How do you check out from reality? You can't. It's kind of hard. So you have to do the best you can and try to get more sleep, try to do meditation, deep breathing and the de-stressing kinds of things. Take it easy on yourself. Procrastinate a little bit if you can on some projects. Everything doesn't have to be done right now.
Mm-hmm.
To try to recover through that, and having a loving, supportive family with lots of hugs, right? Because physical hugs really does help a lot. Will help you get through those things. But how do you prevent it? Stop trying to be Superman.
Mm.
I was in a Zoom call with some Christian friends a few weeks ago, and I had a meltdown or a burnout right there on the call with everybody, because I'd gotten to the place where I felt comfortable finally sharing, with these friends. And the phrase I used was, I feel like I have to be always on.
Mm.
I have to be Superman. I have to always be there for everybody. Got to make sure the bills are taken care of, and the laundry's taken care of, and the house is clean, and the kids are fed, and the wife is, helped out the door to work, and I do the best job I can do for my job and my customers, and I got to get ready for a sermon this Sunday, and I just felt like I had to always be Superman, always be on, and I don't, and you don't either, and that's the biggest thing you can do to stop burnout. Is stop trying to be Superman to everybody. You can't be everything to everybody. The most powerful word that you can learn to stop this kind of burnout is no.
Wow.
You just have to be able to tell people, you know what? I love you. I would love to do this for you, but for my personal health, I have to say no to this right now. Maybe later, not right now. That's probably the biggest thing you can do. And if you're at work, as far as in the work environment, a lot of companies now have quiet rooms. And if they don't, you have your car, just take a 15-minute break.
Yeah.
Listen, if smokers can go take 16,000 30-minute smoke breaks, you can take a 5 or 15-minute mental break.
I've always slightly resented the smokers because I'm like, I want to go outside and just stare out into space for a while. I don't smoke, but can I have a smoke break?
Right. It makes you just want to go outside and find some place, where the smokers are not, but someplace outside and just stand out there with your invisible cigarette and, and get away for 15 minutes a couple times a day.
Good advice. Excellent.
Yeah. There's an app called Calm. I know it's on iPhone. I'm not sure if it's on Android, but fantastic app. And there's, there's just some like background music and sounds like water and, waterfalls and rain and ocean waves and all that. But then they have some music but then they also have like guided meditations to kind of walk you through deep breathing and scanning your body mentally and that sort of thing. Don't dismiss those. Don't think they're just woo woo or
Yeah.
stupid or don't work. They work. They really
Yeah.
help. Take
And
15 minutes a day and go do that.
Headspace is another one if people
Yeah.
want to check that out. That was
There's lots of them out there. Calm will actually take your insurance potentially. So you might want to talk to your insurance company or HR about it. I know my company actually sent me an email, or my health insurance company sent me an email and said, "Hey, you can get a free subscription to Calm covered by your insurance." I'm like, "Yes,
okay.
I'm all over that." So yeah, look into that at your job. It's, but at the very least, go out to your car, turn on the air full blast so you have some white noise, and just focus on your breathing. Do something to get your mind off of work. Check out from work for 15 minutes and just, focus on white noise, your breath, anything else, ocean waves, whatever, just to kind of take a quick break. And that 15 minutes, a couple times a day will do wonders to help prevent burnout in the office environment. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Thank you. This question was, how can faith-based organizations create inclusive environments for neurodiverse individuals?
This may be hard for churches to be able to do because of limited resources potentially. But if you can, what I would suggest is a separate, smaller room for a subset of your kids' church congregation, right? The kids to have their own space. And the same for like the adults, have like a quiet room for the adults where you pipe in the sound so they can hear the music and they can hear the preacher, and give them a volume knob. Maybe they could turn it down without the lights and the smoke. If you have, that kind of a church where there's the stage with the lights and the smoke and the loud music and all that kind of thing. And of course, lots of people around them clapping potentially, right? Depending on the type of church you go to, you may have that kind of environment, which is very stimulating, and maybe too much for somebody, on the spectrum. So, you could just set aside a room. Maybe it's one of your Sunday school rooms that you teach Sunday school in before church, before the main service begins. But then once service begins, that room could be kind of used also as a second purpose. And it could be like a quiet room, for the kids or for the adults. That's one thing you could do. Another would be, to, first kind of make an announcement from the platform that, whenever you're talking about kind of recruiting for people to do different ministries around the church, like, to clean or to run sound or to be on the praise team or to work with the kids or whatever those kind of things that you're trying to recruit people for. If you're doing that kind of an announcement, maybe at the same time add on to it. And we are very inclusive. We would love to have people on that are neurodiverse with ADHD or autism also participate. And we encourage you to let us know that when you come and sign up for volunteer for this particular ministry, and let us know what we can do to accommodate you. Something as simple as that.
Yeah.
Right. Could I think go a long way with the neurodiverse community.
Yeah. I know a friend of mine really appreciated that church. He offered him a job, and that was exactly what he wanted. He's the sound guy, and he loves it because it gives him a focus, and it's his job, and it gives him structure. And it's just been such a blessing for him. For someone else, it might be, like you said, having to go to a different room. We do have a small church, so we don't have to worry about, it's not sensory overload, but
Right.
yeah, so I just thought that was brilliant, but give someone, sometimes it does require that person to have some sort of job at the church, something to do. Not always, but I do know a few folks I know seem to want to do something, to be really, involved. Others just want to sit back and listen, and that's okay too. So don't
definitely.
assume, my point of saying all that is don't assume they don't want to work.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Right.
a big misconception.
Yeah. And again, back to the superpower gifts thing, a lot of us on the spectrum, we're really good at certain things.
Yeah.
And that may be
sound.
IT, right?
Yeah.
Or that may be sound. Like because I have more neurons to process auditory, I'm really good with sound. I'm really good with music. And I pick up on things that other people don't pick up on. And so I worked with sound at the church where I used to serve at, before I became a pastor, and also did the IT, and also sang on the platform, and also played keyboards, all because of these quote superpowers of being on the spectrum. And so, yeah, I wanted to be involved. I wanted to use those abilities. So some of your best talent could come from that neurodiverse community. So I would seek that out, and also like you were mentioning, maybe they just want to sit and just be quiet and just listen, and so don't pressure them. Yeah,
definitely. And so we talked about the common, I'm speeding it up a little bit because of time. We talked about some of the common misconceptions about neurodiversity in professional settings. Unless you had anything else that you wanted to add, I was going to go to the next one.
Yep.
Okay, what strategies can employers implement to reduce the stigma associated with requesting workplace accommodations for neurodiverse? Okay, so we talked a little bit about this too, but is there anything else? I feel like maybe we answered that, but maybe there's something.
The only thing I would want to add is that as the company, as the HR department, when you're making your stance known to your employees, we're a diverse company. We're okay with the diversity. We embrace that because we realize that gives us different perspectives and talents and so forth. And then you go and you make your list, right? Caucasian, African American, straight, homosexual. What are all the different things that you're listing? Please include the neurodiverse community, right? Because it's not being acknowledged, it's not being talked about, but it needs to be. And then let them know we can make accommodations for you within reason, as long as you can do your job. And let's talk about that. Here's the email address. Here's the phone number. Here's the website to go to. But let us know, hey, we're thinking about you too. And we know you're out there and we hear you and we want to help you. And that's not really being done in a lot of companies.
And I have a question about that. What does that look like? Because I know I'm just picturing somebody having an argument about that. Well, we do put that on our application. Do you have any limitations or handicaps? But like if it was someone like me, I'd say, no, I don't have a limitation or handicaps, because I don't really feel like I do, to be honest, even though I do technically have some of what people will call a disability. I do well at my job. I don't want to write that I have a limitation or a disability. For example, let's say I'm really sensitive to lights and sound, and quiet space would be better for me, but I can endure it. So, what would someone like me do if I was really sensitive to it, though? Say I couldn't endure it. So I'm thinking maybe someone else can't endure it, but has to learn how to adapt to it. I feel for those people. Is there something we can do, put in the application that'll say, do you need softer lights or something, like something simple, instead of saying, do you need a limitation or do you have a disability? Sounds kind of
right. Well, I think on the application, that's really more referring to physical disabilities, right? Like, do we need to have wheelchair access or a ramp, accessible bathrooms, those sorts of things? I think that's really more what that's directed towards,
right? But
because
we should include the neurodiversity in there,
not on the application so much, but in your communication to your employees when you're talking about diversity in general.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah. You said,
right. Like ethnic diversity or sexual orientation diversity or whatever other diversity that we're talking about in the DEI world, we need to include neurodiversity in that, in those communications and in your efforts to accommodate people and let them know that they're heard. And again, I think that the company has every right to expect you to be able to do your job. Right. If you can't do the job because of your neurodiversity, well, then that's not a job for you.
Right.
But at the same token, doesn't mean that they can't help accommodate you with softer lights or a quieter room and, those sorts of things. So, yeah, I would say just, I don't think the application is the place for that. Okay. I think because they're not going to ask you if you're black or white. They're not going to ask you if you're gay or straight. That's illegal.
Yeah.
Right. So they really shouldn't be asking you, are you neurodiverse in the application? Because that's also illegal, because then that could be used as a way to discriminate against you in the hiring process. So, but after you're hired, they need to communicate, hey, if there's anything we can do to accommodate you, we see you, we hear you, come to us. Here's how you contact us. Here's some of the things that we can do or whatever. And I think one of the questions is, what can companies do?
What strategies can employers implement to reduce stigma associated with workplace accommodation for neurodiverse individuals? Yeah.
Well, the stigma would be communicate, right? Let people know we know you're out there. We don't think there's something wrong with you. You're just different, and we want to help accommodate you. But as far as what they can do to accommodate, I would think set up a quiet room for one. But if you could, if you find out, wow, there is a population within our workforce that is vast and it's way bigger than we thought. Okay, well, maybe you can take one of your suites within your office and turn the frickin' lights off and raise the window blinds and maybe put some soft lights in there and some ocean wave sounds, right? And then say, this is the neurodiverse room, or this is the room for people that struggle with being in the loud, bright environments. And they may not even be in the exact same department. Well, in the post-COVID world where we were all remote and not in the same room anyway, if you're forcing people to come back to work, which I think is one of the questions you were wanting to ask was, what can they do to help people now? What do we do in this situation where they're forcing people back to work? Number one, I would say, if you can accommodate to not force people back to the office, especially on the spectrum, then don't force them. Let them stay remote if they want to, because they can set up their rooms, their offices at home in such a way that is very accommodating for them. Plus, they don't have all of the talking going on around them.
As an employer, you don't have to pay for that.
Right. And that's less space you got to pay for. So if you can accommodate that, that'd be the first thing I would say. If you just insist on having people in the office, then I would say, find out, do a poll, find out from people how many of your employees are actually in this category, and then create a room, create a space that is quieter, maybe has some ocean waves, maybe has softer lights, the windows are open, turn off the fluorescents, that kind of thing, so that they can be more productive and produce better results for you as an employer, because they're not fighting against the noise in their head that's coming from those stupid fluorescent lights overhead. I can't stress how much turning off the fluorescent lights does for people on the spectrum. It is huge. I mean, they go home exhausted from dealing with just fluorescent lights. And then you add on to that all the other noise that's going on in the room, the printer's making noise and people are opening and closing their drawers and they're talking, and hey, how about that game? And it's, if they want to be part of that conversation, they can insert themselves into that, but don't force them to have to hear all those conversations, to hear the slamming file cabinet drawers and the copier lid closing and the printer printing and the coffee machine dripping. If you're not on the spectrum and you're hearing me say all this and you're going, I don't understand. Imagine everything that I just described being 100 times louder than what you're hearing it right now. That's how a lot of people on the spectrum perceive those sounds. And then there's the fluorescent lights, which I've already discussed. So and it's likely that if you were to create a room like this, that's quieter, that's softer lights, that a lot of those people would not wear cologne or perfume, because they know what it does to them. And they know these are the kind of people in this room that, like me, may get overwhelmed by the smells of a cologne or perfume. So it's possible that you've got a room full of people with no cologne or perfume on, or very light, a light spray of it or something. And that alone could be a huge difference for people on the spectrum. So they're not dealing with the overwhelm of smell and feeling nauseous, the bright lights, the sound, the overwhelming amount of sounds and so forth. It's just a calmer, quieter, less smelly, softer light room. And that will make them more productive and make it so that those human beings, I know that you're employees, but they're human beings, get to go home at night and actually not be exhausted, mentally fried, autistic burnout, because of the environment that you put them in, that you think is okay because it's okay for neurotypical people, but it's not for people on the spectrum. Because again, remember the picture I mentioned earlier with the exponential amount of neurons that process all this stuff. We're seeing, hearing, smelling, feeling, all of that stuff
5x, 10x, 50x, 100x times more than everybody else in that room is.
Yeah. Right.
So
right.
those are the kind of things you could do if you're insistent upon bringing them back into a physical office and not allowing them to work remotely. Even, I understand you want the camaraderie and you want the interaction and all that kind of stuff. Okay, give them at least 2 days remote work, right? Do a hybrid model where they're in the office 2 or 3 days and at home 2 or 3 days. That will also help them have a mental break. If you just can't, give them the space because you don't have the office space or the real estate to do that sort of thing, give them a couple of days to work from home. That will help too.
Yep. I just picture like a neurotypical person maybe watching this and be like, well, those lights bug me too. So I wonder too, like, what if we just made a change all around? Some employers might want to do that, might just want to have softer lights for the whole crowd there. And if that doesn't do any harm to the neurotypicals, then why not think about that too?
When absolutely.
Building offices.
The suite that I was in before COVID, before we went home, was a lot of days the lights would be off until 10 o'clock. Everybody liked it.
Yeah.
And then one person would walk in at 10 o'clock and they'd flip the lights on. You'd hear everybody in the room go, Well, I know that whole room is not filled with neurodiverse people.
Yeah.
So you're right. A lot of people don't like fluorescent lights. It's really bad for people on the spectrum, but I don't think anybody likes fluorescent lights to begin with. I mean, put in LEDs and dim it down a little bit, open up all the windows and get some natural, or go get those bulbs that reproduce natural sunlight. Because what's bothering people is the spectrum, the vibration, the frequency of that particular light. Well, sunlight has a different frequency than a lot of these office lights do, especially the fluorescent ones. So there are lights out there that mimic the frequency of sunlight. Put bulbs like that into your office.
I'm telling you, wanted forever, but we got him outside. And as soon as he was outside, he was like, oh, everything's fine. And we're like, oh, we could all breathe now.
Yeah. I just literally took my son to the museum last week. And
it's hard.
It's, he did well. He did really well. But I didn't know how he was going to do because he's on some medication now that's kind of helping with a lot of this. And before, there's no way we could have been out of the house for 8 hours and in that environment for 6 hours and not have had some sort of an issue. So the whole day I'm just on pins and needles. And by the time I got home, he got home, he's like, cool. And he just went back upstairs and started watching YouTube. I collapsed in the bed and I'm just exhausted. And then my wife walks in the door and I start bawling. She's like, what's wrong? I'm like, I just had a really long day and I was on edge the whole time. And, because I'm having to be super dad.
As a parent.
And worry about what's going to happen and try to pretend to be normal, in that environment as well and hold it all together and be the strong one. Cause, I had my daughters there to help me, thank God. But, nothing happened. He enjoyed it. And, had a good day and we came home, but I was still on edge the whole time. It was the Science Museum. First we went to the planetarium, which is in the same building. And then we went and did the Science Museum, which is 5 floors. So it was a good day. We had a good day. I was like, the whole day until we finally got home. And then I think, and then I just crashed and it was a long day for sure. So,
I love how God works all these things out.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Good. This was a good conversation. I'm going to let you go. I don't want you to get overstimulated. No.
Yeah.
Me too.
I did want to mention.
Yes. Let's talk about the book. Yep.
There it is. So this is my fictional book. You can find it. I think you'll have the link probably in the show notes. It's on Amazon, Apple Bookstore. A Visitor from Beyond Logan's Restoration. It's a fictional book about a burned out accountant who came up in the Western evangelical religion and kind of crashes and burns because it's not answering the questions that he's had. And so he has this prayer to God that basically says, wreck my theology. And so God sends him someone from the cloud of witnesses to do that very thing. And you kind of get to see the back and forth between these two characters. The guy from the cloud of witnesses is from 500 years ago, so he's never experienced modern technology. So the main character, Logan, is getting to share modern, technology with him. And at the same time, the 500-year-old guy from the cloud of witnesses is sharing a different perspective, that of the early church fathers, which is somewhat different than Western evangelical Christianity. So he kind of walks them through that, and they have a wonderful time together. So fantastic book. It's a very short read. It's well, I don't know if it's going to show up, but yeah,
put it close to your body. Put it close to your body, and
there we go.
And then turn it. No,
yeah, so it's a thin book, so it's a short read, and so you can get through it pretty quickly, couple 3 days. Most people don't like reading. And if they do read, they a lot of times won't finish the book. But it's only about 160 pages, 165 pages. So, and the words are really big too. So it's a quick. Yeah. It's a quick read.
And you can get it on Amazon. Is there any other place that you're marketing it besides Amazon right now? Or
it's on the Apple ebook store. So if you if you have an iPhone or iPad or Mac and you like to read ebooks as opposed to paper, you can go to the Apple ebook store and get it there. And I think it's probably less expensive as an ebook than it would be a print book as well. But it's available in paperback and hardback if you prefer the hardback. It's out there. So yeah.
And then my last question, do you have some autographed copies for us if we want to order them directly from you? Well, I want the autographed copy directly.
I haven't thought about that. What? I don't actually, this is the only one that I own. Yeah. Personally, I got that straight from
them and at the market, like at the local, where you live, because you're in Texas, right? Yeah. So
yeah, in Houston area. Yeah.
So those markets that you have, I don't know if you guys in Connecticut, we have a lot of markets like garden, like where they sell plants and stuff, but they also sell like local author books and stuff like that. So you can market there and drop them off. And
yeah, I haven't seen anything like that around here. I mean, I'm sure it exists somewhere, probably more down in Houston proper. I'm out on the outskirts. Don't really see a lot of that out here, but that's an idea.
Yeah, we have these Sunday farmers markets after church, and you can go to various churches and they're selling their produce.
Oh, wow.
We try to support our local artists, musicians, so people will be selling their CDs or their art, and it's really cool because you can just buy some really unusual things that you wouldn't normally buy, but you want to support the person, like a nice little coaster made by some artist in town or something. Yeah, and
I'm all about supporting locals.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I wish more of that was happening in the world, because these mega corporations, with their cookie cutter products that are making billions and billions and billions of dollars, billions and billions of dollars. Yep.
You are a good impersonator.
But yeah, I love supporting local people. The idea of that is, I love that. Small businesses and artists and writers and musicians and that sort of thing. Yeah, I wish we could do more of that and less of this, mega companies coming into a small town and putting everybody else out of business kind of deal. So,
do you have any humorous stories for us before we go, or any voiceovers you want to share with us, or Mickey Mouse, Mickey Mouse, or your Trump? Well, that was pretty good.
Oh gosh, thanks, pal. Oh boy.
See, he's not kidding.
It's really tremendous, frankly. The things that we can talk about, it's so huge. Okay. Believe me. Yeah, it's not my best, but yeah.
That's good.
I like doing voiceovers too. I actually have a voiceover business. You can find me at kevingolden.com. I can do some of those character voices for your kids' birthdays, or if you have a business and you just want a voiceover for a commercial, or for your maybe your voicemail system. Thanks for calling my business. We'd like to thank you for doing business with us today. Please hold, and someone will be with you shortly. That kind of thing. I can do that too. Or if you just want Mickey Mouse to do your voicemail. No, it'd be kind of tough. But I think Mickey Mouse is now in the public domain, or the original one is. So I don't know where Disney feels about doing Mickey voiceovers for private businesses, for-profit businesses. I don't know if they'd come after me on that or not. But
yeah, I'm wondering about that. Wait, can you?
Yeah. I mean, I can do the little private messages for your child's birthday or graduation, or like a special announcement. Like one time I called my granddaughter because we were about to go on a Disney cruise. And so I just called up as Mickey Mouse and told her we were going to go on Mickey's Big Boat, and I walked back into the door of her apartment where they were. And she's like, K-pop, Mickey Mouse just called and we're going on his big boat, she loved it. So, that kind of thing, I can do those sorts of things for very affordable. I'm not trying to break anybody's bank here with a Mickey Mouse recording, but I would love to do those for people's kids or,
that's awesome.
Anything like that. So, yeah.
Cool. Well, I really enjoyed this hour that we got to spend together. It's been a while, and hopefully we could do more of them. Yeah,
absolutely.
In the future. So thank you so much for coming out. And I'll just stop the recording and we could talk for a few minutes. And the thing I wanted to mention too is that after this series, there's been a lot of interest on specifically more to do with the church and what you mentioned a little bit about the religiosity of some of the churches, the Western evangelical gospel and the real gospel. So like there are people that want to hear more about that. So I will be definitely reaching out to you about that. And also, I would encourage everybody who's listening to check out Kevin's ministry. I would love it if you would share a little bit about your ministry that you're doing, and then we can end from there. Because some people really have a passion for also knowing the truth about the gospel. And whether you're a believer or not, it really is really fascinating how he teaches the end times and everything. I've learned so much from him myself. So it's really encouraging message. So
yeah, I have a ministry called Roaring Rivers of Grace. .com is the website. We were doing in person every Sunday, but it was getting to be a little expensive for the space because I'm not great at marketing things like that and getting the word out and trying to get people to come from all over Houston. There's quite a few people that are looking for a church like ours in the Houston area, but they live so far away. If you're not familiar with Houston, you could drive for a couple of hours and still be in Houston. It's huge. Wow. It's the fourth largest in terms of population, but in terms of landmass, it may be the largest, certainly one of the largest cities in the country. Because it's so spread out. And it really can take a long time to drive from one part of Houston to another. So trying to get all those people from around the greater Houston area to come up to my little corner of Northeast Houston was kind of difficult and it was getting to be expensive. So pretty much I'm just recording and placing them on YouTube. And I am more than open to doing Zooms like this if people want to have just open discussions, Q&A about a topic. I'm more than open to doing that. Where I'm at now is I'm not putting the pressure on me. Remember I said earlier about the powerful word no. I've gotten to a place where I don't feel like I have to have a Sunday service every week in a building to impress God. Like that, I teach against that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And here I was getting myself back into that kind of mindset, and I realized it, and I shut it down. I'm like, I'm not doing that. And so I'm just kind of in this place where I think it's in the Message translation, but I forget this exact phrase, but or where it's from. But there's a phrase in the Bible about flowing in the unforced rhythms of grace.
Oh, yeah.
That's where I am. I want to flow in those unforced rhythms. I don't want to be like, oh, I got to do this. I got to make myself do that. I got to perform and make God happy. And
Godfrey Birdall is a good musician for that. He wrote a song about that.
Yeah. So I'm just going to flow with it. Yeah. And what that looks like exactly, I don't know. It's record a video, put it on YouTube, do Zoom and have questions, meet with people and have coffee in the middle of Houston somewhere, whatever that looks like. I'm open to that sort of thing.
That's
and
awesome.
Instead of this rigid, got to do it every Sunday kind of a deal.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we're at. But, if you have questions about the Bible, you're like, I really don't know how to read it. I don't understand. Why does God seem like he's really pissed off in the Old Testament and loving us in the New Testament? And is it the same God? And why all this confusion? Why the contradictions? Reach out to me. Go to roaringriversofgrace.com. There's a contact button there, and just say, hey, I would love to do a Zoom with you. And I have questions, and I'll be more than happy to sit down with you and do that sort of thing. Because my heart is to teach the truth of the true gospel. That word gospel meaning good news. Actually, in the Greek, it's the too good to be true good news that's actually true is what that word gospel means in the Greek. So, and the Western evangelical gospel is not too good to be true good news. That's actually true. It's actually bad news. So I'm just trying to help people that have come up in that, which is most Americans that have gone to church, to kind of help them understand the scriptures, how to interpret, biblical hermeneutics and that sort of thing. And maybe see a different perspective on this than what they grew up in, including the perspective of the historical church fathers, the ones who were taught by John the Apostle and Paul the Apostle, and their writings and so forth. Because there's some history in church history about where things kind of shifted and why and how and what the impact has been and how that gets us to where we're at in the Western evangelical church in America today, and the problems that has caused. So, if you're interested in that sort of thing, please reach out to me through the website, Roaring Rivers of Grace, like a lion roars, roaringriversofgrace.com. Click the contact button and just let me know. And I'd love to have a conversation with you, whether that's in Zoom or over the phone, and bring people with you. However, I'm open. I'm very loose on this sort of thing. I don't want to be rigid. So, yeah.
Sounds good. Yeah. Thank you so much. It was great for me being neurodivergent just to be able to listen whenever I want. I didn't have to show up exactly on time and,
Right.
So I did the first couple of times and then I kind of wasn't there and I felt bad for a minute there. I was like, "Oh, Kevin, I'm sorry I couldn't make it." He was so good. He was like, "Oh, I don't mind. Just listen whenever you want." So
watch the replay.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
So I was
and it got to be more and more where
Yeah.
everybody was watching the replay and nobody was showing up in person. Nobody was showing up online. And I'm like, why am I doing this $300 a month, conference room to do something at a set time on a set day when nobody's showing up at that set time and set day because they prefer to watch the replay. So I'm like, I don't need to do this. This is kind of pointless. I'm taking away time from my family and I'm spending money that I don't need to spend. And, it just didn't make sense. Just so I could fit in the cookie cutter box of what most people think church should be.
Well, you got to make your recording, though. That was really important because you got to say everything you wanted to say about the gospel. You basically have.
Oh, yeah. And I can do that from home, right? I can do the same thing from home.
Yeah.
I don't have the whiteboard behind me, which I love to use, but most people can't see on the video anyway. So it just helps me kind of get my thoughts out. So I don't know, maybe I'll grab a whiteboard and throw it in here one day here in the office. And,
no regrets. It was all good.
Yeah, it was fun.
Thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording and then we can talk. All right. Take care. See you next time.
See ya.